everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my weekly wrap-up of October 18th, 2015. I hope you guys have enjoyed your weekend. I participated in Dewey's 24-hour readathon yesterday on Saturday. Well, it actually ended at 7 a.m. this morning, but I was asleep like any sane person would be at that hour on Sunday morning. It was a really good readathon. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of short fiction lined up to read and I succeeded in reading all the short fiction I said I was going to read, so I'm very happy about that. I think I usually do better at the week-long readathons because it just gives me more days and more time to fit reading in. The 24-hour ones, you really have to do absolutely nothing but read all day long, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm an adult. I have to do adult things, and I can't always put them on hold for reading. But it went very well, and I really enjoyed everything that I read, and I had a good time seeing what everybody was saying on Twitter. I didn't finish any novels during the readathon, so all the stuff I'm going to talk about today is stuff that I finished by Friday. The first thing that I read was yesterday's Kin by Nancy Kress. This is probably a novella, but I read it in physical format, and it was over 100 pages, so I counted it. This is a story in which aliens land in New York City, and they warn humanity that in 10 or so months, the Earth is going to pass through a field of spores and it's going to infect everybody and kill everybody. And the aliens know this because it happened to like 2 of their planets and they want to warn us about it. Of course, humanity goes into overdrive trying to isolate the virus and create a cure so that we don't all die. And the POV character is Marianne Jenner. She's a geneticist who makes a discovery when the story starts that has to do with the aliens, and she has 3 children who are also involved in the story, and it's all the various ways in which humanity might react to meeting aliens, meeting our cousins, and impending death. I thought the story was just okay. The premise of the story was interesting, but I really felt like it was missing something, like it wasn't long enough to really develop the characters. I felt like Marianne's son, Noah, his story was incredibly rushed to me. He makes some crazy life decisions that are very extreme, and I didn't find it quite believable. There are reasons why he does what he does, but I just didn't quite agree that it should have been that fast. And it was also kind of gloomy by the end. It doesn't have a very happy perspective on how humanity behaves when we are faced with destruction or with something very difficult. And I'm not sure I cared so much for all of the individual characters and how they approached the apocalypse either. While yesterday's Kin didn't really impress me all that much, I was never really aware of Nancy Kress as a science fiction writer before, so I think I'm going to definitely check out some of her other work to get a better idea of what she's like, because she seems like she writes hard science fiction. There is a lot of science in this novella, and I really enjoyed that. I thought that part of it was done well. So it's just possible that I will like some of her longer works with more character development, more room for development a lot better. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Young Men in Spats by P.G.Wodehouse, and I like this quite a bit. It was another one of his humorous collection of stories. None of these was incredibly memorable. It was just, once again, a bunch of young men falling in love, falling out of love, trying to get engaged and trying to get out of inconvenient engagements and things like that. And of course, older relatives appear to give advice or meddle with affairs. It was funny in places, but like I said, not highly memorable. I couldn't point out individual characters or stories and tell you what I liked about them, but once again, while listening to Housework, it was entertaining. I do think the Drones Club is the club that Bertie Wooster belongs to, so I think some of the characters that are mentioned in here show up in Jeeves and Wooster stories, and mostly I was just thinking I wanted Jeeves and Wooster to show up in one of these stories. I wanted more characters like Jeeves or something. Some straight men to play off of the funny men, and that didn't really happen. So it was okay, but I think I'm gonna stick with more Jeeves and Wooster stories and more of the Blanding stories if I can get my hands on them. The next book that I read was Endymion by Dan Simmons. This is the third book in the Hyperion Canto series, and I buddy read this with Tara from Terabyte. We had a really good time talking about it, and I think we're going to be reading The Rise of Endymion in December together. I liked this book. I didn't think it was nearly as strong as Hyperion and the Fall of Hyperion. It follows a different group of characters because it's like 300 years in the future, but there are a lot of callbacks to the previous books. I'm going to talk about this book more in a separate video. It turns out I had a lengthier spiel about it and how I felt about it, so I'm going to put that in a separate video, and that'll be out in a couple of days. Next, I read another Lord Peter Wimsey mystery, which I really enjoyed. This was Have His Carcass, and it's the return of Harriet Vane. Harriet Vane first showed up in Strong Poison. She was accused of poisoning her ex-boyfriend, and Lord Peter was involved in proving that she didn't actually do this. And Have His Carcass picks up after this. She's been exonerated. She's gone off on a walking tour. She's working on her new book because she's an author of murder mysteries. And while walking along a beach one day after eating her lunch, she stumbles across a dead body. But the tide is coming in. She investigates a bit, she takes some pictures, and then she leaves to find help, and the body is washed out by high tide. And Lord Peter gets wind that Harriet has discovered a body, and he comes down to help her investigate it, and they're trying to prove, trying to find out who this guy is, for one, and then why he would have been murdered rather than suicide, because there are basically no witnesses. Nobody has seen the body except for Harriet, and there's some weird stuff going on with this guy. I really enjoyed this mystery. I thought that the 5 red herrings was too repetitive and tedious in detail, and even though Have His Carcass is a longer mystery, I just thought it all worked a lot better. There wasn't as much rehashing of potential ways that things could have happened, and I was so happy I guessed a key thing about the murder that they didn't actually figure out until like the very last chapter. I was like, yes! Yeah. I never do that. I didn't guess who the murderer was, but I did guess one of the keys to figuring out why the alibis weren't working very well, so go me. And then I read one of my most anticipated releases of the entire year, Ancillary Mercy, which is the third and final book in the Imperial Raj trilogy. I have loved every book in this series. I cannot wait to read more by Leckie. I can't wait to know what she's going to write next. Maybe something else in the Raj Empire, maybe, I hope. A lot of people have read and talked about Ancillary Justice and Ancillary Sword, and while the plots of each book are a little bit standalone, the storylines are a bit self-contained. I don't want to go into plot too much because it could spoil the previous books. Essentially, a part of Anandar Mianai is coming to Athok Station and threatening the AI of the station, and Breck has gotten involved in that as well. She wants to defend the station and its inhabitants, because the station is an AI, a sentient AI. So yeah, this starts off as a story about revenge, about getting back at something that's hurt you, and it ends with a really powerful statement and decisions being made about what makes you a person, what makes you a significant entity, driven by contact with this other alien civilization, the Presger, and their concept of other people and like what a human is and different types of humans is very confusing. It's truly alien, and they have this concept of significance, which is not the same thing as like sentience, and it's a different way of viewing humans and Raj citizens and the AI. There are so many AI in this world, on ships and on stations. They run everything. And Breck is an AI. And it's so interesting to see how she talks about herself and what she deserves and the decisions that she makes to offer options to other AI in the story. I liked that so much, and I'm going to enjoy rereading this entire series even more. This isn't as complex in its world building as some things like, well, the Jean Le Flambeau series by Hano Ryanimi is the science fiction series I think of the most when I think of a story where it's just dense and complicated and nothing is explained to you, and it'll improve more and more. Your comprehension will improve as you reread the books. With the Imperial Raj series, I'm not so sure that I will necessarily understand world building more, but I think there are so many things and themes and issues packed into these books that rereading them is just going to be a real treat. The final thing that I read this week was Persona by Genevieve Valentine. This is kind of a futuristic science fiction-y, not so science fiction-y, political thriller about a future where nations are represented by powerless, beautiful celebrity diplomats called faces, and then the face of a South American nation named Suyana Sapaki is almost killed in an assassination attempt. She goes on the run with a paparazzo named Daniel, and you gotta find out why and what their motivations are. I thought this was a kind of an average book, and I wanted to talk more about why I thought it was not a great success, so I'm going to do a separate review on it to talk more. That's everything that I read this past week. Interesting mixed bag of genres and stories and how much I enjoyed each one, so I think it was pretty successful. And yeah. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these and you want to talk about them in the comments down below, and I will be back in my next video. Bye.